Good evening, Nadine. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of the Bilingual Primetime Newscast on EQUINOXE Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital. Dwelling our top stories in this edition of the news: the indomitable Lions of the Republic of Cameroon grabbed their qualification ticket for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. The boys of Coach Clarence Sitaf beat the Comoros Island players by 3-0 today at the Amadou Aïdjo Stadium in the nation's political capital, Yaoundé. And also in this newscast, we will tell you the disturbing story of a 70-year-old internally displaced widow. She is in a critical health condition, begging for help. Right, Nadine, thanks. Dear viewers, for staying with us into the second segment of this edition of the news. We begin with the sad story of a 70-year-old internally displaced widow in the southwest region of the country. Rebecca Nje is in a critical health condition at the Boya Regional Hospital, and her treatment has been suspended as a result of financial constraints. Derek Chato reports from Boya.
Maminje Rebecca gasps for breath at the Buya Regional Hospital. She was pushed out of her home in Ekuna, a town in Moyoka subdivision, Fako division of the southwest region of Cameroon, into the bush by the war. And while there in the bush, the 70-year-old widow was hit not by a bullet, but a stroke, and this has been her state. Her 13-year-old granddaughter, Akumbi Jacinta, is helpless. There is no money, and the hospital has stopped treatment on her grandmother. Today, the Mayabels movement is visiting internally displaced persons admitted at the Buya Regional Hospital.
Today, we are at the General Hospital to reach out to the internally displaced persons, to sympathize with them, to pray with them, and to help clean the environment.
The movement also met the case of Maminje Rebecca.
Whatever you have, in any way you can, please reach out to these internally displaced persons. Today we are being introduced to people who have stayed in the bushes for the past 2 years.
Barrister Abbo Bala, the founder of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, is also informed through that medium of the critical situation of this internally displaced mother. He came and saw where the Anglophone crisis has kept Maminje Rebecca and her granddaughters, who are also orphans.
So when I got the call and that they needed about 70,000 to pay for just the CT scan, so I had to rush here to at least try and provide the money for the CT scan, and also to see how we can raise money to support her. She's in a very dire and a very desperate situation. I think you would have seen the video that EQUINOXE has just taken of her, and also the kids, she's there with a grandchild and another, I think, relative. So whoever can help in supporting her, we would really appreciate it.
These interventions are coming just to start the treatment, reason why the family is pleading for help. And it is the wish of Jacinta that one day her grandmother should be able to blink her eyes and call her name again.
And as the Anglophone crisis deepens further, hundreds of thousands of persons displaced by the socio-political and security tensions, their conditions continues worsening. Their situation continues worsening, with many of them living in very difficult, precarious, and even deadly conditions, like Rebecca Nje, the 70-year-old internally displaced widow. And added to the socio-political and security crisis hitting the two Anglophone regions of the country is the problem of water crisis, which is hitting several parts of the country, as well as the northwest regional chief town, Bamenda. And Stella reports.
The need for quantity and quality water has remained a huge demand by the population of Bamenda. This is due to the water crisis that has been plaguing the region for years. Despite strides made by experts in the water resources and energy sector, Nothing much has changed as the results have been described as detrimental to the health of the local population.
It's really an embarrassment because at one point in the city of Bamenda, there was a lot of digging every day, digging of trenches, and we later got to understand that it was to bring water, because water is life. Unfortunately, after all the digging, Bamenda is still very much unsafe with water, because after the digging and the planting and the displacement of tanks and whatever, we still suffer the threat of diseases of water, given that some of the water that we fetch and drink carries a lot of dirt, a lot of soil, sometimes so reddish that we find difficulty to cope with it.
I'm afraid to cook food, I'm afraid to wash plates, even my child's napkin. It stains, it makes it dirty, so it's really horrible.
The demand for the precious liquid remains relatively high in households in particular and communities in general, as even the little that flows from taps leaves nothing to be desired. In all these, local inhabitants have devised ways of coping with what is supplied in order to minimize the health risks that comes with consuming water of doubtful quality.
We develop some domestic attitudes, some domestic self-methods by boiling extra. Now you fetch the water looking reddish, looking dirty, you have to let it settle sometimes, and then you boil to a certain degree and keep before you can drink, else water ceases to be life.
I normally work with a local filter. I'm using it to filter my water. You can see it for yourself. Look at the color of the cotton inside the funnel. I've not even filtered up to a liter of water and the cotton is already dirty.
For about 2-3 years now, I'm using bottled water, and sincerely, it has been helpful.
Inhabitants say for Cameroon to meet the aim of the Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is aimed at ensuring availability and sustainable management of water for all by 2030, experts charged with the supply of water must work on the quality of water delivered to the local population.
Consumers in the Republic of Cameroon are decrying the increase of prices of basic commodities on markets across the country, and meeting today in the economic capital, Douala defenders of consumers' rights said that the increase in prices of basic commodities in the market is the direct consequence of the 2019 finance law, and they called on governments to do everything possible to raise the purchasing power of Cameroonians. For me, Armstrong Sander has more.
Observers say the recent increase in beer prices as well as prices of basic necessities like rice, fish and sugar is the direct consequence of the 2019 finance bill in Cameroon. The principal consequence on the population is the fall in the purchasing power of Cameroonians since income or salaries remain static. Alphonse Aïssi, the president of Cameroon Consumers Foundation, said the increased tax on enterprises is transferred directly to consumers.
La pression fiscale faite sur les entreprises est répercutée.
He said consumers can't continue to bear the huge tax burden, especially considering the fact that nothing is subsidized. The demand for sugar in Cameroon, for example, is estimated at 3,000 tons yearly, with just 150,000 tons available, thereby creating inflation, as just one enterprise is given the responsibility to produce sugar, though it is unable to meet up with the huge demand.
On invite l'État à tout faire pour briser le monopole octroyé à une entreprise.
Consumers frown at the monopoly given to such enterprises in Cameroon and called on governments to facilitate competition. They say consumers are paying the heavy price as monopoly favors speculation and consumer exploitation. The transport sector is not left out, as taxi fare in Cameroon, for example, has moved from 150 francs CFA to 250 francs within 10 years. In 2008, taxi fares in Cameroon used to be 150 francs CFA, and today, Cameroonians pay at least 250 francs CFA as taxi fares in places where there are taxis, and even more in places with no taxis. In essence, the situation is caused by a couple of factors, including inflation created by unscrupulous traders.
Cameroon Consumers Foundation is calling on the government to assume its responsibility in order to give an adequate purchasing power to consumers across the country.
Coming up, we tell you why you should visit the dentist to check up the health state of your teeth at least once every year and not when you have pains. A great proportion of the world's population is affected by tooth-related health problems, including tooth decay, cavities, gum diseases, and oral cancer. Close to 60 to 90% of the world's population suffer from tooth decay. It is almost the same in Cameroon, notably in rural areas. Having to visit the dentist regularly is not the appointment everyone looks forward to. Many people visit dentists only when they have pains. Medics say it is one of the most important ones to be kept. When you don't visit the dentist once every year, you can have tooth decay or cavities that can develop into tiny openings or holes. But if you visit the dentist yearly, these problems can be detected at an early stage. But the more you delay and come to the dentist when you already have pains, you will spend more. How to brush the teeth is yet another issue. We are supposed to brush our teeth 2 times a day, in the morning after the breakfast and not before. Use a soft toothbrush. Change it after 3 months. Use a good toothpaste and brush for at least 2 minutes. Dental professionals are not only concerned with fixing teeth, they also clean your teeth and check for abnormalities that could trigger larger health issues in future. October 2017 presidential election, 2018 presidential election candidate Franklin Ntifon comes out of his zone of silence close to 6 months after the presidential election in the country last year. In a press conference in Douala today, the presidential candidate for the Cameroon National Citizen Movement said he stayed quiet to study the country, its activities and administration, and the general environment which he claims was a new study ground. And Prophet Franklin Ntifon also told the press that the 2018 presidential election, which did not favor him, was the start of a study and experience which he believes will help him to obtain victory in the upcoming municipal, legislative and perhaps the regional elections with his new movement, the National Program for Peace in Cameroon, NPPC. And of course, his aim remains to change Cameroon with the light of God. And the religious leader and politician believes only a frank dialogue between government and Anglophone leaders can put an end to the armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. Prophet Franklin Ntifon added that for now, only the head of state, Paul Biya, has the key to the socio-political crisis hitting his country. And out of Cameroon, the United Nations organization has set the final casualty figure after the tropical storm which tore through southern Africa more than a week ago will only be known once the flood waters have receded or moved away. At least 417 people have been declared dead in Mozambique by the country's land and environment minister. The new figures put the overall death toll at about 700 people across Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi. And the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said today that the Buzi and Zambezi rivers were at risk of breaking their banks again. And in sports, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon have qualified for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations billed for Egypt. They grabbed their qualification today after defeating the Comoros Island boys by 3-0, and the 3 goals were scored by the team captain Eric Maxime Choupo Mouting, and of course the Christian Basogok, and of course Njie Clinton, who scored the 3rd goal in that encounter at the Amadou Aïdjo Stadium in the nation's political capital, Yaoundé, earlier today. And that's it for this edition of the news on Equinox Television. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Good night. Good night, Nadim.
Good night, Babila Jonathan. Fin de ce journal. Mesdames et messieurs, merci pour votre aimable attention et passez d'agréables moments en compagnie de nos programmes.